Emily Lakdawalla is a solar system expert and is live in Los Angeles. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
It's my pleasure.
So how nervous were you when we were waiting to hear whether it had all gone okay?
If I'm honest, I'll admit that I never really believe it's going to work until it works. So it's such a relief when it finally does that we actually hear those relieved words of touchdown, nominal, TD nominal, and see the celebration and mission control.
Yeah, lovely scenes of celebration. Now the hard work starts, I suppose. It's got to actually go around and collect these rocks. What's it going to be doing?
Well, after a couple of months, actually, of checkout, where they're going to make sure that all the instruments work properly, all the mechanisms work properly, they fly that helicopter a little ways across the Martian surface. Then they start actually doing geology, and they're going to do the same kind of geology that Curiosity did, where they look at different kinds of rocks, they examine the context between rocks, they figure out the story that the rocks are telling them about the history of this particular crater, which did have a river running into it, created a crater lake, and probably deposited lots of sediments, which, if we're extraordinarily lucky, we'll be able to find evidence of microbial life on Mars in those rocks. But what Perseverance is going to do that Curiosity didn't do is gather samples that will eventually be picked up by a European-built rover, returned to an American-built lander, launched into orbit, gathered and returned to Earth.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to get a little bit more detail on that, because we are going to have to wait quite a while. And I did wonder when it launched and collected these rocks. So just talk us through, how are these rocks going to get back to Earth?
It's a long process involving 3 very big missions and very large collaborations between NASA and the European Space Agency. So Perseverance is the first step. It's the sample gathering and documenting. So they'll take pictures, they'll figure out the mineral composition, they'll do ground penetrating radar surveys all around where the rocks are being gathered, and they'll use all of that science to figure out what the best samples are to bring back to Earth. It'll be a mix of the delta rocks, the materials that were deposited into this crater lake, as well as possible volcanic rocks and other more recent materials, all of which should help to tell the history of this location on Mars. The next mission, 2 missions will actually be launched nearly simultaneously. One of them will land a lander on the surface, American-built lander, with the European-built rover. That's the fetch rover that will go collect all those samples that Perseverance has dropped, bring them back to the lander, put them into a rocket, and an American-built rocket will launch it into orbit. The third mission will enter orbit, a European-built orbiter with an American-built device that will go grab the sample capsule, snatch it right out of orbit, bring it back to the European-built orbiter, which will then leave Mars and return the samples to Earth. It's very ambitious, and I'm really looking forward to it. Lots of problems that haven't been solved before. It's going to be exciting.
That is fantastic. Thank you for talking me through. That's the first time I've heard that proper explanation of how we actually get those vital samples back. And in a couple of sentences, how likely are we to actually find these signs of life that we're after?
Well, you know, I'm always going to be a skeptic. I'm going to be doubtful until we see it. But we'll never find these things if we don't look. As far as how likely it is, I don't know. You know, this is really ancient history. It's 4 billion years old. And it seems like if life began on Earth at that time under virtually identical conditions to Mars, it should have happened on Mars, but we just don't know. And so that's why we're looking.
Emily Lakdawalla, great to have you on. Thank you.
You're very welcome.